When Albert Einstein had his revelation about the theory of relativity, what has become known as that, he didn't reason it out. He didn't sort of go from known facts and add another known fact and then gradually sort of deduce that this world was not what it seemed. What happened to him, as he himself described it, is that he, in a flash of revelation, he just saw that things were different than they appear. I mean, the way we cognize this world and all the opinions that we have about this world are not some theory that we've read in a book, for the most part, at least not the basis, the fundamental basis. It's that we look around. We live in this world and we have this regular experience, don't we? Of being ourselves, of there being a certain consistency, recognizable consistency about the experience we're having. We feel like separate bodies. We watch our bodies age. We see new children be born. We see that certain actions bring certain results. I mean, depending how clear our vision is, depends on the world that we see. There was some discussion in, I think from what David was reading somewhere today about not complaining about the world work. Some people feel that they're always being victimized, that everybody, they look at this world and their conclusion is that people are rotten and they're treating me unfairly and I never get what I deserve. And that's just based on a perception. Now, Einstein had a perception. Perception sometimes travels to the realm of revelation. The word revelation means when something is revealed, a truth revealed. So we sometimes speak of, I had a revelation this morning, because there would be a feeling that somehow something that was hidden from me was revealed and that there's a profound level of truth to what I've just understood. When we use the word revelation, we usually mean it more than I had an insight this morning. It's like something shocked me, startled me out of my normal way of thinking. So it happened to Einstein. He was totally startled out of his normal way of thinking, perceived a reality that literally changed everything. And then, as the story is told, he spent 10 years working backwards from what he knew to be true to try to figure out how he could explain to others what he had perceived. Because if it was a true revelation, there would have to be some logical link between that point and any other point in the universe. And then he explained it, and only a few people understood it, but it was the right handful. And they gave it the stamp of approval, and now it's become the way we think, which is what we perceive in our habitual state of consciousness is not really what's happening. In fact, just reading scientific books, which I can barely understand, I just don't get it from that point of view. But they deconstruct this whole universe and say it's just something completely else. The masters tell us that the difference between our ordinary waking consciousness and the state of consciousness of a realized master is no less dramatic than the difference between being a sound asleep and then waking up. Last night, all of us who are members of Ananda, the people who support Ananda and make it happen, which can be any of you, whether you're a member now or not, it's very easy to become one. Once a year we celebrate by having a party. And we had that party last night. It was extremely enjoyable to be together as friends, and very, very happy evening. And by the time the day was finally over and everything that I needed to do at home was done and I lay down to sleep, I went instantly to sleep, slept blissfully happy with the glow of the evening, and woke up many hours later, it's Sunday morning, woke up actually having no idea what day it was. And I started making all these other plans, just, in those minutes of wakefulness, until I realized that it was Sunday, and that had certain implications for me. But while I was sound asleep, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what room I was sleeping in. I knew nothing at all about anything. I was having an experience, and that experience was pretty dull, really. Happy. I was sleeping happy, but it was dull. And then I woke up and this whole world rushed in. Now, the state of unawareness of my sleep compared to everyday life going on around me, the masters say that our ordinary waking consciousness, when we think we're just so really together and actually really seeing everything just as it's happening, is as dramatic as my ignorance in being asleep compared to when I woke up. Now, what do we do with information like that? because we can only experience what we're experiencing. When I'm asleep, I'm asleep. If I'm awake, only half awake now, it's still the only wakefulness I have. But what it provides for us, above all, is a sense of humility, and also a sense of receptivity, and a sense of inquisitiveness about what would it be like to shift my consciousness so radically? Now, how do we even know such a thing is possible? Well, there's two reasons that the thought comes to us. One is that truth is inherent within us. And even though we walk around being so proud of ourselves and being so sure of ourselves, almost all of us deep inside have this sort of nagging thought that maybe I'm not as smart as I wish I were. My great anxiety, deep-rooted anxiety when I was growing up, was the fact that I had a certain amount of that ability that is so prized in our society, which is primarily the ability to do well in school. That's really the thing that's most prized. I just knew how to do school pretty well and pretty effortlessly. And so that made people think that I was pretty hot stuff, right? And I also, in my early years, was in a school system where the bar was pretty low, let's just put it that way. So when you're surrounded by short people, you look a lot taller. But it torqued, and it was a karmic necessity, it sort of torqued my perspective in two interesting ways. One gave me an inflated sense of self, but it also profoundly and in a way that's been very hard to shake, instilled in me this great sense of anxiety, because I knew that I really didn't know. And yet, because people thought that somehow there was some talent there, I was caught, because all the feedback coming back told me that I really had all this together. But my inner self, the self that was really looking for divine realization and didn't really care much about the things I could already do, was just so anxious because I didn't know how to find that. Do you see what I mean? I'm sure you understand that. And that's when I finally met Swami Kriyananda, and when I was 22 years old, it was really, like the last gasp of a drowning person just desperately hoping they could make it to shore, which is, I think, why when I met him, I literally formed an alliance with him in my heart in the first 15 seconds that I knew him, before he even spoke. Because suddenly I was looking at someone who intuitively, there was no evidence, he literally just walked into the room. There was no external evidence, but intuitively I could feel in the words that came to my mind, he has what I want. He has what I've been looking for. When he looks at this world, he sees something else. And there was a part of me that could feel that. I could feel that whereas I and everyone else I knew had like a limit to our perception, there was an edge to what I called myself, and I just couldn't get beyond that. That was what I later realized was the unbearable sense of confinement, this feeling that there's a reality out beyond that I can't get to. And I saw Swami Kriyananda walk into the room, and there were no edges to his consciousness. There was just no edge. It just went out as far as I could see. He had somehow crossed that boundary. So these two realities come together for us. There's this deeply implanted divine reality, the end of our reading today. This is what the masters experience, and so they insist is our reality also. And not everyone hears that. Many people just, when those words are spoken, as the Bhagavad Gita said, when truth is spoken to someone who's not ready to hear it, he goes to sleep, literally. It's spoken to him and he falls asleep. Because it's just not, there's no karmic readiness to hear it. But others, when that truth is spoken, just there's this tremendous sense of, where have you been all my life? I've just been waiting for you, waiting for this truth to come. Because it is our inner nature. And so God sends into this world, and these messengers come willingly. The great avatars and their army of assistants. They come into this world again and again to witness, to just witness for this truth. Witness by merely walking around. The story of the life of Buddha is so touching in so many ways. In one story that's so sweet, it's called the Buddha's First Sermon. There had been a group of ascetics that Buddha had spent some time, I'm not certain who it was, I don't want to give a credit to it, but there was a group of spiritual seekers. And I think they had met Buddha earlier before his revelation of enlightenment. And so then the Buddha went, as the story is told, and he finally had reached this point of determination where he sat down under the Bodhi tree and he swore that he would not rise up from that spot until the full truth of divine consciousness was known to him. This was his moment. And then he sat under that tree, and the force of Maya, which was called they call Mara in that system, which is the force of illusion. You can call it the devil, you can call it the tempter, whatever you want. But Mara came and she tried to lure the Buddha back into the ordinary way of perceiving things. And she presented, herself as a beautiful, attractive woman, and she presented all the wealth of the world, and she presented the power that could be his, and everything that the heart longs for. Maya, Satan, and we call him the devil only because he's luring us in a direction that's not evil in any sense that you have to fear it, but simply will not keep its promises. That's why they say Satan is a liar. Because he says, everything your heart longs for, this is how to have it. You can have it this way. Just, indulge this aspect of yourself. Try to become a powerful person. Depend on money. Look to others for support. Oh, aren't you beautiful? Aren't you special? Aren't you the only one who really understands? Whatever it is that we're susceptible, just whispers in our ear and we say, oh, isn't that nice? Like this. But the difficulty with it is very simple. We follow that path, and sooner or later, it simply doesn't give us what we wanted it to give us. That's all. That's all that happens, is that we find ourselves disappointed. So the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, and Mara gave him every possible temptation, just like Jesus coming out of the 40 days in the wilderness, and the devil tempted him. Satan came and tempted him. And then at the end of all of that, it is said that the Buddha, Siddhartha at that time became the Buddha, and he slapped the ground 3 times, and he says, Mara, I have conquered you. Like nothing you say to me is going to hold me now. I have seen the reality. And then Maya vanished because it's only a perception. It's only a perception that this is the way to happiness. And the Buddha saw that behind this world, there's something completely other happening. And what's so remarkable, that's what Einstein saw. Einstein looked at this world and perceived another reality, and then scientifically explained it to us. Einstein was not a self-realized master, but he was moving in that direction because he was taking apart the illusion and seeing the truth behind it. Now, if nobody ever experienced this, we would say that the Buddha was a lunatic, because, of course, and some people do think that the Buddha was a lunatic. Because look, this world is solid. Some people might think Einstein was a lunatic. But those for whom this has cracked, who have lived enough lifetimes and followed enough false trails to the point of non-fulfillment, no matter what they promised, when you hear that, something inside of you says, yes, I know that. Even more deeply, something inside of us feels, yes, I know that. So the Buddha got up after that, and now his sadhana, his spiritual practice was over. And he wandered out, not caring, not knowing. Once you see that, past and present, all of it, sorrow and bliss, pleasure, pain, all of the ups and down waves that were always riding, he saw that behind them, there was just this one force of bliss and love and perfect freedom and perfect contentment, all coming back. The center point of all of this, as Yogananda writes, is a point of intuitive perception in my own heart. And contentment is, there's no effort to be content. How can we not be content when everything we're seeking is already ours? We think we have to be content with this small house, be content with this aging body, be content with the children that God gave me, be content with the money that I've earned. But all of it is sort of saying, I don't quite have what I really want, but I'm just going to sort of try to have a good attitude about it. In my years with Swami Kriyananda, I've often thought, I used to think, how disciplined he was. He always had such a good attitude. And gradually I came to understand that I was disciplining myself to have a good attitude, which is to say my perception conflicted with my ideal sense of myself, and by willpower I would pull myself into the right response. But with Swami Kriyananda, I gradually came to see there was no conflict between his perception and his ideals. His perception had been elevated, and his ideals and his perception were the same. He didn't have to try to love people. He didn't have to try to be patient and kind. He didn't have to try to be content with whatever happened to him, because it all comes back to a point of intuitive perception, and everything that we're longing for is just here. Now, we work toward that, but when it comes, it's a revelation. And this has been the themes that we've been talking about for several weeks: attunement, grace. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, look, that's just simply the truth of things. And contentment is the side effect of that revelation, you see. And so the Buddha, rising from the Bodhi tree, having conquered the force of delusion, just was walking down the road. And this group of ascetics saw him in the distance. He didn't say a word. He was not explaining anything. They weren't even close to him. But they sensed that there was something in him. He had what they wanted. And that was said to be the Buddha's first sermon, when he just walked down the road in this state of consciousness. And so this is the story that all of us are living through. And all of our spiritual practices are designed to still the inner commitment to a false perception, so that we may realize what is really happening. You see, revelation, is not creating anything. It's just suddenly being conscious of that we were ignorant of until that moment. You see how extraordinarily liberating that is? Swami Kriyananda has written a great, for those of you who are brand new, Swami Kriyananda is the American man who is the founder of Ananda. He's the direct disciple of Yogananda and has been the instrument for us to really understand these teachings. He's written a great deal of music. Almost all the music that you hear, much of the music that you hear, and all that's sung by the choir was written by him. And just before all of this section started, the choir came up and sang that beautiful song, "Home is a Green Hill." Just, you can hardly hear it without weeping, or you just simply weep and don't even try to hold it back, because it just goes so deeply into some part of ourselves. Swami talks about the music. He says he was very interesting. A reporter was interviewing him once and asked him, "What's your favorite music?" And he said, "Mine," like that, very innocently. And then he stopped for a moment and he said, well, first of all, he said, "I never call it my music, I call it God's music." He said, "You didn't ask me what I think is the best music." He said, "You asked me what is my favorite music." And he said, "My favorite music is the music that God has given me, because it perfectly resonates, with his own inner consciousness. And obviously it resonates for many people with our own inner consciousness too, because it is a divine revelation of our own nature. More than that, it's in tune with this particular ray for those of us who are on this path." He's written a piece called The Divine Romance, which is actually a piano sonata in 3 parts. And we also sing it sometimes as a song, which is, the first part is a song. All of that is just an introduction. A woman at Ananda village named Mukti, who's a very highly trained pianist, has been practicing that piece and learning how to play it. And she's very skilled. and sincerely wanted to play it as he intended it to be played. So he sat with her, next to her, while she was at the piano, and he worked with her. And she would play a little bit of it, and he was sitting in a chair right here. I was listening to it. And then he would, every phrase, he would stop her and he would make minute adjustments. And he kept saying, I'm sorry, it's not really quite written that way. He said it was impossible to write it, and then he used the phrase, exactly as I heard it. And he said to her, it's not that I'm being so picky about this. He said, you play it beautifully. He said, but this is not my music. I heard it. And what I'm telling you is asking you to play it exactly as I heard it. Because it represents a certain vibration. And his desire, above all, was to be loyal to what was given to him. This is not my music. And I thought about that as a perfect image of really all of our life experience, isn't it? Who owns this life? Who owns this consciousness? Who am I really? We draw this little ego circle and we think, I am myself. I was speaking last night. Some of you who come regularly have noticed that we've become a rainbow up here. We all used to wear yellow, but now some of us wear different colors because Swamiji created recently a new renunciate order. And various of us have taken initiations that have caused us to wear colors that represent that. And I was going to say, Swami David, my husband now, Nayaswami is what we are called. Swami David, Swami Asha. We're still getting quite used to it because for 40 years of Ananda there was one Swami, which is Swami Kriyananda. So there's still a little part of me that I can't use that word about myself or even hear it without thinking that they're talking about someone else. But it's kind of a false humility in a sense, because the idea of a misplaced humility is what I would call it. Because the idea of renunciation and the idea of taking a spiritual initiation of any kind that commits you to something that is going to diminish the ego, or you're committing yourself to the diminishment of it, or the effect of it reduces your sense of self, then to then become self-conscious about having reduced your sense of self. You see how confusing that gets? Because what we're really doing is committing ourselves to not exist. And we need to really move into that reality. And what I was wanting to say is, many, many years ago, when Swami Kriyananda used to speak, as he still does sometimes, but he spoke more then because he was training us in lots of practical ways. He would often give classes about relationships and marriage and friendship, and he would use this word impersonal love, talking about marriage. I, not having the sense to keep my mouth shut, always reacted strongly to that word impersonal love because I didn't understand it properly. And I remember once having the chutzpah to suggest, that I think hubris is actually a better word, to suggest to Swami that really, when he was talking about marriage, he shouldn't use the word impersonal love because nobody understood it or liked it, and it was very off-putting. I'm telling him how to reach people, mortifying, just mortifying in retrospect, but he was always respectful. He listened of my potential. He listened very respectfully, like this, and made no objection, and then totally ignored everything I'd said, which was exactly the right response. And I was not so stupid as to not notice. I was still bewildered. But I, at that stage of my life, even on the spiritual path, was still thinking that somehow I was going to combine these realities. I was going to be spiritual by essentially continuing exactly as I was and just calling it spiritual. Isn't that a good plan? Right. I'll just keep this and I'll keep that, and I'll even say God wants me to have this and God wants me to have this, and you really wouldn't expect me to give up that, would you? And why would we be so extreme as to do this? And this doesn't hurt anyone, and I think never mind. It just goes on and on and on. I had a very complicated script, It's a little bit exhausting to keep it all running, but it entertained me and it kept me busy for a long, long time, way busy. But what I didn't understand is very simple. As much as you crowd of your own determination to be a limited, separate being, to that extent, well, here's the prize for it. You get to be. Isn't that wonderful? I insist on having my egoic limitations, and God says, sure, keep the money. It doesn't hurt anybody but you. Why would I care? Right? Because that's what happens to us. We make ourselves small, and then we suffer from this agonizing sense of loneliness and confinement. And we're so confused. So we reincarnate again and think maybe if I just do the same thing again, it'll work. That's why Master put it, that's what Satan does. Satan promises us that we only missed it by a half inch. And if we just make a slight adjustment, that this time it'll work. Really, it almost worked that time, didn't it? Except that it was so cold in Detroit. Maybe if you try the same thing in Hawaii where there's not so much snow, great, I'll do that. I'll try it in Hawaii. But it's a little laid back in Hawaii, and so I didn't really quite have the energy. So maybe I better go to New York, and I'll go to New York. And we just keep incarnating, because we don't really get that it's the entire perception that's wrong. It's just the entire perception of self. So I am in my life. This word impersonal, it's just like I don't want to be impersonal. I'm a Cancer. It's all about me, isn't it? It's just God coming into my little place and making me feel better, isn't that so? And very, very slowly it occurred to me that, Master has this marvelous statement. I love this one. I've said it for years, and I must say maybe yesterday I began to slightly understand it. He said, people make the grave error of thinking that everything that happens to them concerns them personally. Well, yes, it happened to me. Isn't it about me? But the whole point is, what is me? The whole New Testament can be totally understood properly or totally misunderstood by what did Jesus mean when he said I. Just one word of one letter, I. When Jesus said I, what was he identified with? How did he define himself? I, Jesus, was the body that we perceived as Jesus, but the consciousness was the infinite. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't see Jesus, the son of Mary and Joseph. He didn't see anything. He saw a dancing play of light that was one with the infinite. And then our perception was Jesus the body. So when he said I, we must have meant Jesus the body. But he didn't. He meant I, the infinite spirit. And it's really kind of hard to take personal credit for I, the infinite spirit. I mean, people do actually. It's not merely that, God, that I am one with God, but God is one with me, like this. No. As soon as we perceive that, as we see what Einstein himself told us, there's nothing here but a play of light and shadow. The very same atoms that form this body used to be part of some solar system, and when I die, they will, the power that holds them together will dissipate, and these atoms will go off, and who knows what they will become. Do we chase all those atoms? You're mine, this one is mine. No, we gradually just begin to realize that there's no me to claim it. And what we become so impersonal about is we become impersonal about everything. There is no person to claim it. Yogananda put it so sweetly when someone praised him for his humility. He said, how can there be humility when there is no consciousness of self? No consciousness of self. Consciousness, yes. Awareness, yes. Awareness of this vast interplay. Like Yogananda describes, this vast imperium, sextillion universes creating and dissolving. Total awareness. But no sense that I'm the one doing it. It's just this movement of consciousness. And so Swamiji talks about something so down to earth and grounded as marriage, the relationship between two individuals who have, all this, everything focused on the personal. And he says, the more impersonal your love, the deeper your love will be. Because you see, how much can two individuals, defined as two individuals, love each other, even if they try really, really hard to love each other, But if we, as someone once put it, he said, you don't hold your head on by gripping your neck. You just don't have to grip your neck to hold your head on. Your head stays on better if you just let it go. And so our unity and love with the people around us. And I don't mean we dissolve all our relationships because, atoms come together. We're attracted to each other. But living side by side in this greater reality with the least possible sense of personal ownership and identity, you see, then we become one with the infinite. And we don't then have to strive to be content. We don't have to strive to be loving. We don't have to strive to be patient. It simply becomes who we are. Extraordinary promise of the spiritual path, of all true spiritual paths. This is self-realization as Yogananda expressed it. This is Buddhism, this is Hinduism, this is Judaism, this is Christianity, this is Sufism. This is all true paths. I and my Father are one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God. The Lord is one. There is Atman Brahm Asmi. I am one with the infinite. There is no reality except the divine. It begins as a hope in the heart. It gradually becomes the possibility that that could be mine. It becomes a pathway of concerted effort. And then all effort ends, as Yogananda says, in ease, in effortless perception of the divine reality. What joy, what joy. Bless you.